afternoon from Mickey and from me from Castle Goring. Regrettably, Mickey still has not delivered, and I'm not even sure if she's entered labour yet. But she is going to the vet tomorrow because I'm getting a little bit concerned that she's late. So bear with me. Hopefully she's going to settle down, or even better, she's going to jazz up, which would mean, Mickey, wouldn't it, that the whuppies are on the way? Well, today we have quite a rather distasteful and for me odious task to deal with, which is the Andrew business. But before that, I'm going to go to something a little bit lighter and a little bit more entertaining, our normal jerks. Because, I mean, really, when you have to resort to Meghan and Harry for light entertainment, you know that you've been swimming in a sea of feces, and that there is a discomforting amount of the stuff very close to you. So, without further ado, I will plunge right in with Ophelia, who says, Harry's wife has claimed she knew nothing about Prince Harry and the royal family, yet was great friends with Princess Eugenie before she met Prince Harry. Interesting. How could she have never heard or known a thing about Prince Harry when she was great friends with Prince Harry's first cousin, whom he is close to? Do I think that she lied about this as much as she has lied about everything else? Oh dear, Ophelia. This is our moment of levity, because we're going to go down into the sewer from this bit of dross. That tells you what we have in store for us, doesn't it? Well, I mean, what could be more convincing than that Meghan understood that Harry is such a dolt and such a dupe, and so very much in the tradition of his predecessor of sorts, King Henry VIII, another really rather odious redhead, who, I don't know if you remember the story of King Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves, but Henry VIII wanted to be loved for himself. And so, notwithstanding the fact that he was no longer in the first flush of youth, and that he had a rather rotten leg that stank to high heaven, he still thought he was the most captivating and appealing man on earth. And when Anne of Cleves arrived in England, she was going to be wife number 4. He engineered a meeting, and she was supposed to be so awestruck by the magnificence of this wonderful man that even though she was en route to marry the king and had to be pure, she was going to be smitten to such an extent that she would fall madly in love with this knave, because that's what he would have been, and all would have been well, instead of which she gave him the right royal brush off, and he never forgave her for it, because he saw in her eyes the contempt that she had for this odoriferous older man who was pushing himself forwards. Then, of course, she discovered who he was. Well, I think Harry wanted to be loved for himself, because, I mean, let's face facts, Harry has a wonderful self, well worth loving. I mean, aside from being stunningly good looking, uh, there's also the fact that he's brilliant. Let's remember, he's brilliant. He does have a certain charm, or did at times. And so what did dear Meghan do? She's claimed to him and to the world that she knew nothing about him and everything happened organically, and that she found out all about him from himself. Mickey, take out the violins. It's time for us to have another melody to true love. Interesting, isn't it, how true love begins with a B, has a U, it has two L's, then it has a rearrangement of this, ending in IT. Yes, Ophelia. Harry was easy to convince. It's such a pity for poor Megsy baby that the rest of us aren't so easily duped. That's where she's come a cropper, you see. She thought she had this really ace guy that she knew was in her pocket, and she could play with him the way a little boy would play with marbles, or a bigger boy would play with his balls. Remember Harry juggling those balls of his? Well, she's doing it, and she's done it, and we see it, and we're not duped, but Harry was duped. ABA says, Lady C, what do you think of the news Prince Andrew has agreed to a private settlement with Virginia Giuffre? Do you think this will always make him look guilty and not able to salvage his reputation? Do you think he did this to put this to bed and allow the Jubilee to go ahead without this in the background? Thank you for your insight. This is the first of many questions, and I'm going to cover it for what I hope will be the last time, because I don't think that there can be much doubt that I have found the whole business most distasteful. Not always for the reasons that other people sometimes find it distasteful. However, to answer, it is a private settlement, yes. Do I think it will make him look guilty? I think many people have already decided that if he hadn't been guilty, he wouldn't have entered into the settlement, which is ludicrous. It's a civil case, and you enter into settlements for various reasons, one of which is financial. It was going to cost him, and he doesn't have much money, far more to fight this to its natural conclusion than it has cost to settle it. That is a big consideration, a financial consideration. There's no admission of guilt. On the contrary, the settlement terms make it absolutely clear that he admits no liability or guilt for anything whatsoever. And let us not forget that Mrs. Giuffre is the one who said, this is not about the money, this is about my reputation, and I'm never going to settle. No amount of money is going to make me settle. Then it emerges that at the very outset, she had offered to settle on terms which he was not prepared to accept, and he is the one who fought it. She didn't fight it. He is the one who fought it. And then what happens now? She has settled. I think you ought to read the wording of that settlement very carefully. You will see that he has made a personal payment to her, which I understand on very good authority is next to nothing. He has also offered to make what is called a substantial donation to her charity, the one where she has set herself up as a protector of young girls. Obviously, can't be the same girls that she was busy trafficking, which she did by her own account. And even if it hadn't been by her own account, there is Caroline Adriano's account. And Caroline Adriano was going to be a huge sticking point for Virginia Giuffre, because Caroline Adriano would have been called as a witness, and Caroline Adriano would have stated very clearly what she previously stated in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which was that she was sought out, found, trafficked, trained up, and run by the procuress named Virginia Giuffre, then Roberts. What people don't seem to understand is that until she was 18, all of her wrongdoing could not be nailed to her. Only once she turned 18, American law is so bizarre, and I hope I'm not offending Americans when I say this, but it is so bizarre that America will try a 14-year-old child for murder as an adult, but a 17-year-old who has been a professional prostitute and a professional procuress has no liability for any of her wrongdoing until she is 18. That was a difficulty that both sides were going to have to face, because once she turned 18, she was as culpable as the people she has accused, namely Ghislaine Maxwell. Let's not forget that Virginia Giuffre is the one who revived the whole of the business against Jeffrey Epstein. She did it single-handedly with the connivance of Sharon Churcher of the Mail on Sunday. And I have to tell you, I've been reading the Mail and I hang my head in despair for the depths to which the popular and supposedly mainstream press have sunk in recent years. I keep on saying it, Harry and Meghan have a point, and they do. The fact of the matter is, though, when you are up against a greater enemy, and the greater enemy is ambitious politicians who want to muzzle us, silence us, and turn us into sheep and lambs. We need a free press, but my goodness, don't we put our fate in the hands of scum. Sorry, but it's true. And yes, my understanding is that he, of his own volition, despite pressure from his brother Charles, his nephew William, and with the understanding that his grandmother would have liked this to go away, he is the one who made the sacrifice. He chose to make it. I know this to be a fact, and it is supported by something David Boies, who is Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, said. He said the settlement offer came from their side, meaning Andrew's side. It came out of the blue. It was concluded within 48 hours. Think of what happened in the 48 hours before he made the settlement offer. The photograph, which Andrew has maintained is a fraud, and which, it has to be said, Lady Victoria Harvey has given extensive coverage to in the last few weeks. Because Victoria, who I know slightly, her mother's an old chum of mine. In fact, I know Naomi Campbell slightly, and her mother is a chum of mine. They're a completely different generation from me. So, I mean, I was never ever going to be palsy-walsy with them. But I do know Victoria, and she's a lovely girl, and she has courage and loyalty and decency. And Naomi has been appointed to the Queen's Commonwealth Trust as an ambassadress. That doesn't happen completely accidentally or out of the blue, may I point out. Virginia Giuffre, when she was Roberts, was at Naomi Campbell's birthday party in May 2001. She had on the outfit that she has in the photograph that is purportedly of Prince Andrew, Roberts, and Ghislaine Maxwell. There are versions of that photograph going around where Ghislaine Maxwell is standing on her own, and the picture fits perfectly. Then there are photographs of an Andrew figure and Giuffre being popped in. Very convenient that Virginia Giuffre should lose the original of the photograph, something so crucial, so important, so fundamental to her story all along. So she discovered it, that she'd lost it. Well, that was good news to Prince Andrew's legal team, because they know that the royal family has wanted this embarrassment to be dispensed with once and for all. They got in touch knowing that Virginia Giuffre's case was irretrievably weakened, not only by her admission that the original didn't exist. Very convenient that it didn't exist, we all have to agree, unless we're dumb. But also, there was another factor involved, and the other factor was very simple. Caroline Adriano would be called as a witness. Now, my understanding is that Virginia Giuffre has been, shall we say, relieving herself of bricks, because there was in place immunity from prosecution for her post-18 antics and criminal activities. She knew, as did everybody who has any smattering of knowledge on this case, that if she got into witness box, Andrew Breckler was going to make mincemeat of her. That was before they knew that the disputed photograph, the original, no longer exists. I mean, talk about convenient to lose the one important piece of evidence that would prove your supposition, or so you say, even though, as far as I was always concerned, it was always an innocuous photograph no matter what, and didn't prove anything except the fact that they'd met each other. But to wrap this point up and not belabor it, there's another oddity with that photograph. The March 2001 day upon which it is alleged to have been taken was one of the coldest days on record in the United Kingdom. Yet, there is Virginia Giuffre in the identical costume that she has on 2 months later at Naomi's birthday party in the south of France. What happened to that 50 or 60 degrees Fahrenheit? Just leave you with that thought for what it's worth. Karen McBean says, why is she accepting money instead of seeing him in court? She didn't need to, in my opinion. She did need to, Karen McBean. She needed to desperately. She couldn't dare go to court. One of the things that Virginia Giuffre has done is unpicked previous immunities from prosecution. She is the one who was the driving force behind what ended up being Jeffrey Epstein being charged despite having entered into immunity from prosecution deals, and which also resulted in Ghislaine Maxwell being charged and tried. My understanding is that Virginia Roberts Giuffre has been quivering and quaking in her boots, that she would have to end up testifying in New York, that the press, which despite its overwhelming partiality in favor of her, might have turned once Caroline Adriano gave her evidence and stated that Virginia Giuffre was as guilty as sin, and certainly as guilty as Ghislaine Maxwell, according to Caroline Adriano, and that Virginia Giuffre didn't deserve 1 penny in damages from Prince Andrew. She said it. She said it in black and white. Can you imagine the effect this must have had upon, and you have to have a degree of sympathy for the girl, because, I mean, no matter how odious a character you think she is, the fact of the matter is, she's looking at a loaded gun. And it's not a pretty sight. So yes, I think it all started out with her about the money, but my understanding is that this case did not end up being about the money, that this case ended up being an engine with which the Clinton camp was going to deflect attention away from President Clinton, allow Hillary a free run in the hope that she becomes president, cause a massive distraction, possibly cause Prince Andrew to end up being charged with various criminal offences, like the fact that he committed perjury because he forgot that 27 years ago something happened at 9:27 and he thought it was 9:28, and therefore he's guilty of sin and should spend at least 300 years in prison, preferably Leavenworth. My understanding is that she has not wanted to go to trial at all, ever. But her runners, and she's being run by David Boies and the Clintons, they needed her to settle because things had got totally out of control, largely, ironically enough, because of Caroline Adriano's testimony in the Maxwell trial. But for that, they could have got away, possibly, with their very sound plan. But they've not been able to get away with it because Caroline Adriano's testimony has driven a coach and horses through the whole carefully constructed stink of a case. Also, David Boies, I have no doubt, understood that it was in his interest and Clinton's interest, both Clintons, that Virginia Giuffre accept the settlement, the financial settlement, and that while their objective might have been to get it into court originally, and they didn't care about the money, now they want the fig leaf of victory, because what happens if Virginia Giuffre is charged with the serious crimes that she has admitted she has committed? Once she's on American shores, she can be charged. What happens if she's charged? What happens if she sings because she has previously pointed the finger at Bill Clinton? You see? Wheels within wheels. The whole situation is a lot more complex and murky, and quite frankly, utterly distasteful in my opinion, than it would appear to be on the surface. Anna Perkins says, Lady C, I'm just reading that evidently Prince Andrew and Roberts have settled out of court. The amount will remain undisclosed, but could be up to 14 million pounds. Oh, God. My dear, and you could be a billionaires, and I could be not only a billionaires, but a goddess. And Meghan Markle could be the most popular human being on earth, and a character witness worth listening to. And Harry could be in danger of displacing Albert Einstein from the throne of genius. I mean, if you believe that, you'll believe anything. So anyway, to resume the question. So, £15,000 back in the day for services rendered, point well taken. but it was $15,000, sweetie pie, according to Virginia. $15,000, not pounds. Another $500,000 in a gagging agreement with Epstein. Just goes to show how effectively she was gagged, doesn't it? And that was their worry. You see, they have unpicked every previous agreement. They began to understand that what had worked for them, they were in danger of having work against them. Later broken via this current case, absolutely. This woman has been on a great payday yet again. Your thoughts, Lady C? Well, I don't want to be unkind, but I did laugh when Victoria Harvey said that she supposed that Virginia should be suing God because of the way she looks now. I don't think God had anything to do with it, because she was born a pretty girl and she was a nubile and delectable young thing, and she has the hundreds of thousands of dollars to prove how delectable she was. Greedy. The woman is a glutton. You only need to look at her. She is a glutton, cramming everything, whether it's down her mouth or in her purse. There is something that is so reprehensible about her, in my view. I think you will discover that the 14 million is, my understanding is that it's a 5-figure sum. 5 figures. I mean, it's amazing how the press will come up with, they pluck things out of the air. The lies that they feed people, and they expect people to believe. I mean, I rarely tell you, I despair for humanity if we continue at the rate we're going. Whatever happened to be such important things as truth, honor, integrity, fact, discernment, good judgment, the powers of reason? All of these things have been thrown to the winds in our materialistic, greedy, for everything, for attention, for money, for success. We live in a world where people they've really lost their way in many ways. You know, and this is symptomatic of the press. It's just either people, and I suspect that to an extent, and I'm going to slightly correct myself, I suspect that to an extent, the average person hasn't lost their way to the extent that the press has lost its way. And I think, because when I stop to think of it, my own experience of the public is that the average person is a lot more measured and down to earth and sensible than the press. But all of this, these bellows that you keep on getting from the press, I mean, it's an assault of one's senses. And I will repeat, I don't think this started out as a money thing. This started out as a damage control for the Clintons. Remember, Virginia Giuffre was absolutely adamant, as was David Boies. They were not in this for the money. They wanted their day in court. And they preached that epistle until they realised that not only were they going to get their day in court, but she was going to be torn to shreds. Kitty Mason says, Andrew seems to have admitted his guilt by paying Virginia an out settlement. I wonder why Clinton and all the others seem to be protected from her and the other women. Well, Kitty Mason, I will pick you up on that. I do not think Andrew has admitted any guilt whatsoever. In fact, the statement has gone to great lengths to exculpate him from any wrongdoing. Let's remember that. Why are Clinton and the others being protected? Because President Clinton is extremely powerful. The Clintons are powerful. The Democrats are powerful. The Democrats also know how to play hardball. I will simply mention the name John Durham in connection with a certain Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and various allegations that Hillary Clinton was saying about Donald Trump being in the pocket of the Russians, and now a completely independent judicial authority has made it absolutely clear that no such thing ever took place. Do you think that's going to get big coverage? I agree with Mr. Trump, by the way. I think it is as big, if not bigger, than Watergate. Because this is a Democratic presidential contender effectively tapping into the internet service of, first of all, a presidential candidate, then a president. I can only imagine the hue and cry that there would have been had the political parties been reversed. And I have to say, I find it, as a moderate who has often been a supporter of the people I'm now having to criticize, that such conduct can be not only condoned, but that they are trying to bury it. And the New York Times comes up when it's asked, why isn't it covering it? Oh, it's not going to be wasting its time on unsubstantiated speculation. However, think of all the time it wasted on those golden showers from Russia. I mean, whatever happened to a good and honest press? And whatever happened to a relatively good and honest and clean political system? Princess Green Eyes says, Prince Andrew has settled out of court and made a large donation to Virginia Giuffre's charity. No, he hasn't, Princess Green Eyes. He has made a modest settlement, and he has made a modest contribution. Let us see if it is leaked, how much it's going to be. Because my understanding is we're dealing with 5 figures. That is derisory, especially when you convert it from pounds into dollars. Ralph Owens says, I told you all that Andrew would settle. He just did. Yes, Ralph Owens, you did. You told us that he'd settle, and he just did. I think he's done something very noble. this is going to surprise a lot of people, because I know he wanted to have his day in court, but he has put his mother's welfare above his own, knowing that by doing so, for the rest of his life, he will be haunted by this. Now, if that is not a loving and a devoted son, you tell me what is. He could have gone down the other route. He chose not to. He made the sacrifice. That's what love is all about. And I don't care how the hardcore illiberal press spin it, and all those woke idiots who are deciding that because they have hearts, that the heart should beat, even when the head is telling you that the heart is an empty drum being beaten by a fraudster. No. I actually think this is one of Andrew's finer moments. I do. Susan McGee says, I think they picked on Prince Andrei to keep the Clintons out of this. Apparently Hillary wants to run for president again in 2024. Susan McGee, you're absolutely right. I have said it before. That's been my information. I have been listening to people on both sides of the Atlantic who really know what's going on. And as you might have been able to glean, if only from this broadcast, things are a lot more layered than they appear to be. Yes, this was a massive distraction. But also, what is really interesting, as somebody pointed out to me yesterday, were David Boies and the Clintons championing Virginia Giuffre, or did they know all along that she was going to, in the act of bringing this lawsuit, she was going to be put in the frame as a trafficker? Because you see, they have been very clever in what they've done. Not only have they deflected attention away from from President Clinton to Prince Andrew, but Virginia Giuffre now knows that if she goes after Bill Clinton or any other big name, they will tear her to shreds. She will end up being mincemeat. Her reputation, which is already trashed, will be even lower. And the likelihood is that the legal authorities will then say, well, sorry, Mrs. Giuffre, yeah, we did have a deal with you, but you know, things have changed and we discovered that we left a comma off such and such, and therefore, sorry, you're gonna go and share a cell with your good friend, Gillen. That's a prospect, isn't it? And that is one of the possibilities, that this was a massive setup to protect the Clintons and do it in such a way that they would destroy Virginia Giuffre's credibility at the very moment that they were ostensibly enhancing her victim status. Martina McCosker says, regarding Prince Andrew's settlement, isn't it possible that they decided to let the matter rest because Virginia wasn't willing to go to court and answer the allegations that Andrew's lawyers were going to bring up? I mean, the timing. Only last week the papers were full of how her own conduct was being brought to light. Prince Andrew is still claiming his innocence and the other side aren't arguing with this fact now. The wording is, quote unquote, the parties reached a settlement in principle of the above referenced action. The action being Giuffre versus Prince Andrew. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall between the two parties and how they came to this agreement. Well, I think it's very simple how they came to the agreement, my dear. You know, much has been known, as I think I've tried to indicate to you in the months that this has been going on. There has been much going on behind the scenes that the public didn't know about, and the press either didn't know about or were reluctant to write about. That is still true. Virginia Giuffre was doubtless terrified, and Virginia Giuffre is doubtless massively relieved. And the wording of the settlement is such that her deal, her non-prosecute deal, is enhanced in the settlement. If you know what to look for, when it's there, it will jump out at you. I make that point for what it's worth. Sue Hansey says, Dear Lady C, it has just been announced that Prince Andrew has settled with Virginia Giuffre, and this after she had told the court that she had lost the original photo of herself and Prince Andrew, which one would have thought would have helped his case. It certainly would have. If only he was ever going to settle, why have the case go to court at all, dragging not only himself but the royal family through the mire also? Has something happened behind the scenes, do you think? I wonder if he has been told to make this ghastly situation go away so as not to take anything else away from the Queen's Jubilee year. Well, as I think I have expressed a little earlier, in my opinion, this is one of Prince Andrew's finest moments. And it's very sad that it's the finest moment that will by and large go unacknowledged, because he has made the sacrifice for his mother. His mother is the only monarch that has ever been and might ever be on the British throne for 70 years. He understood only too well that if this wasn't settled, that it was inevitably going to be a distraction. Whether it overshadowed or not, it was going to be a distraction. And he had a moment to settle, which was when Virginia Giuffre discovered, that picture that's so important that of course I'm going to make sure that I keep it safe, but I've lost the original. I mean, what other nonsense are people expected to believe? I think he made the sacrifice. And I think he did it because he loves his mother. And I think it's a noble thing to have done. I don't think he did it for any other reason. I don't think he did it because he felt he was in danger of losing, because with the passage of time, it was becoming increasingly obvious that the other side was in grave difficulties. And that was before they'd even started to really turn the screws on. Anthony Duffy says, furthermore, do you think the Queen is paying the settlement? If she is that not taxpayers' money? Sorry. It's not taxpayers' money. And the settlement, contrary to what you have been told, I know what the newspapers are saying. The newspapers are cheap and vulgar sensationalists who aren't about speaking the truth. They're about whipping up frenzies to sell their newspapers or suck you into their media. You know, they have a serious purpose, but by goodness have they not lost their way. It doesn't come out of the taxpayer's pocket, and the sums involved are small enough that it will come out of Prince Andrew's pocket. Now, I know as a fact, and I'm not in a position to tell you how I know, but I know as a fact that the palace distanced themselves from this whole business. I can't say more than that, because I'm not going to compromise anybody. The palace were determined to keep enough distance between themselves and this, that they wouldn't be tainted by it. They knew that Prince Andrew had a strong case. They knew, as did the American authorities, because let's remember, we have MI5, MI6, the FBI, CIA, etc., etc. You surely don't think both governments don't know about the whole nonsense about the photographs and all of that rubbish, and that they haven't known about this for some length of time. I mean, come on, give me a break. You know, we're speaking about ex-presidents here. We're speaking about presidential hopefuls. You know, we're not speaking about some little guy from the back of beyond. They've all known that certain bits of the information stank to high heaven. My own feeling is that Andrew should have fought this to the bitter end. But I get why he didn't. He loves his mother, and he didn't want to destroy her Jubilee year. And he will pay a high price for this, because many people are going to believe that he settled because he had to. No, he settled because he wanted to, for his mother. Virginia Giuffre and David Boies have settled because they had to. Had they not done it, the very objective of preserving the Clintons would have roped them in rather too severely. And as I've pointed out to you, it has been pointed out to me by people in the know on the other side of the Atlantic, that this has been a very successful sting operation, where Virginia Giuffre, the stinger, has been massively stung, because I don't think she is going to run the risk of ending up in a cell like Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein. Although, by her own confession and her own account, after the age of 18, her actions have been such that she deserves to be right there with them. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening to this. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and keep the questions coming in. Remember, this can't be done without you. God bless and goodbye.